Chapter 64. One section of the prison of La Force, the one in which the most dangerous prisoners are kept, is called the Court of Saint Bernard, but the prisoners, in their vivid language, have named it the Lion's Den, probably because its inmates have teeth which often bite the bars and sometimes the guards. It is a prison within a prison. The walls here are twice as thick as in the other sections. Every day a jailer carefully tests the soundness of the massive iron bars on the windows. The Herculean stature and cold, penetrating eyes of the guards here show that they have been specially selected to rule over their charges by terror and shrewdness. The courtyard of this section of the prison is enclosed by enormous walls, over which the sun shines obliquely when it decides to penetrate into the abyss of moral and physical horrors. There, from morning till night, wander the men whom justice holds bowed beneath the guillotine which she is sharpening. As he walked in this courtyard, with his hands in the pockets of his coat, one young man was looked at with particular curiosity by the other inhabitants of the Lion's Den. His clothes would have marked him as an elegant young man if they had not been in tatters. They were not worn out, however. The cloth, fine and silky in the parts that still remained intact, easily regained its luster under the prisoner's caressing hand. He bestowed the same care on a cambric shirt, which had changed color considerably since his entrance into prison, and he polished his patent leather boots with the corner of a handkerchief embroidered with initials surmounted by a coronet. Suddenly a voice called out from a wicket, "Benedetto!" "Are you calling me?" asked the prisoner. "To the visiting room," replied the voice. Andrea was surprised, for unlike most prisoners, the crafty young man had not availed himself of the privilege of writing letters to ask for visitors. "I'm obviously under the protection of someone powerful," he said to himself. "Everything proves it to me. My sudden fortune, the ease with which I've overcome all obstacles, my improvised family, my new title, and the opportunity to marry into a rich family. My protector has neglected me temporarily, but his neglect won't last. Why should I do anything rash? I might alienate my protector. There are two ways he can save me: arrange a mysterious escape by bribery, or somehow force my judges to declare me innocent. I won't do anything on my own unless I've found out I've been completely abandoned. But then..." Andrea had devised a fairly clever plan. The treacherous young man was bold in attack and tenacious in defense. He had already borne up under the rigors of prison and all its hardships. Little by little, however, nature, or rather habit, began to overcome his resolution. He began to suffer from being thinly clad, dirty, and hungry. Time began to hang heavily on his hands. It was at this moment of dejection that he was called to the visiting room. His heart leaped with joy. He was led into a room divided in half by an iron grill, behind which he saw the somber and intelligent face of Monsieur Bertuccio. "Hello, Benedetto," said Bertuccio in his deep, sonorous voice. "You!" cried the young man, casting a frightened glance around the room. "Don't you recognize me, Benedetto?" "Not so loud," said Andrea, who was aware that those walls had ears. "You'd prefer to speak with me in complete privacy, wouldn't you?" asked Bertuccio. "Yes." Bertuccio took something from his pocket and motioned to a guard who could be seen through the barred window. "Read this," he said. "What is it?" asked Andrea. "An order to let you have a room of your own and to let me speak with you there." "Oh!" exclaimed Andrea joyfully. And immediately he said to himself, Still the unknown protector. He hasn't forgotten me. Bertuccio was sent by him. The guard conferred for a moment with the superior, then led Andrea to a room on the second floor, overlooking the courtyard. The walls of the room were whitewashed, as is the custom in prisons. To Andrea it had an appearance of almost dazzling charm. A stove, a bed, a chair, and a table composed its sumptuous furnishings. Bertuccio sat down on the chair. Andrea stretched out on the bed, and the guard withdrew. "Well, what do you have to say to me?" asked Bertuccio. "What about you?" "You first." "Oh, no. You're the one who has things to tell me, since it was you who came to see me." "All right, then. You've continued your criminal ways. You've stolen and murdered." "If the only reason you had me put into a private room was so you could tell me that," said Andrea, "you might as well have saved yourself the trouble. I know all that. But there are other things I don't know. So let's talk about them if you don't mind. First of all, who sent you?" "Oh, you're very fast, Monsieur Benedetto." "That's right. And straight to the point. Let's not waste words. Who sent you?" "No one." "How did you know I was in prison?" "I recognized you long ago as the insolent young fop driving along the Champs-Élysées." "The Champs-Élysées? That brings us closer to the point. Tell me about my father." "Who do you suppose I am, then?" "You, my good man, are my stepfather. But I don't think it was you who provided me with 100,000 francs, which I spent in 4 or 5 months. It wasn't you who fabricated a noble Italian father for me. It wasn't you who introduced me into the cream of Paris society and magnificent dinner party in Auteuil. And you certainly weren't the one who was backing me with 2,000,000 francs when the cat was accidentally let out of the bag." "What do you want me to tell you?" asked Bertuccio. "I'll give you a hint. You mentioned the Champs-Élysées just now." "Well?" "A certain very rich gentleman lives on the Champs-Élysées." "A gentleman in whose house you committed murder and robbery?" "Yes, I believe so." "You're speaking of the Count of Monte Cristo, aren't you?" "That's right. Now tell me, must I throw myself in his arms, press him to my heart, and cry out, 'Father, Father'?" "Let's not joke," replied Bertuccio gravely. "And don't ever say such a thing again." "Why not?" asked Andrea, somewhat taken aback by Bertuccio's solemnity. "Because the Count of Monte Cristo is too highly favored by heaven to be the father of a wretched criminal like you." "Those are fine words, but there will be more words if you're not careful." "Threats. I'm not afraid. I'll tell." "Do you think you're dealing with pygmies like yourself?" interrupted Bertuccio, once again in such a calm tone and with such a confident expression that Andrea was totally disconcerted. "You're in the grip of a terrible hand, Benedetto. It's willing to open for you. Take advantage of it. Don't play with the thunderbolt it has laid aside for a moment, but which it may take up again if you try to interfere with its freedom of movement." "I want to know who my father is," said the stubborn young man, "and I'm going to find out, no matter what it costs. Who is my father?" "That's what I came here to tell you." "Ah!" cried Andrea, his eyes flashing with joy. Just then the door opened and a guard entered. "Excuse me, sir," he said to Bertuccio, "but the examining judge is waiting for the prisoner." "I'll come back tomorrow," said Bertuccio. "Good," said Andrea. "And please leave 200 francs or so on your way out, so I can have some of the things I need." "I will," replied Bertuccio. Andrea held out his hand to him, but Bertuccio kept his hand in his pocket. Andrea forced himself to smile, but he was completely subjugated by Bertuccio's strange tranquility. Could I be mistaken? He thought. Well, we'll see. Then he said aloud to Bertuccio, Until tomorrow. Until tomorrow, replied Bertuccio.